I never thought life would drag me to this point. Standing on the edge of despair, clinging to the last scraps of dignity I had left. Just a few months ago, everything seemed steady. I had a job, a home, a marriage that wasn't perfect but felt safe. Now it's all slipping through my fingers like sand. Bills piled up faster than I could track. My bank account was a cruel joke, flashing numbers that mocked my helplessness. Job applications went unanswered. Rejection emails clogged my inbox, each one a dead end. I tried to hide my frustration from James, my husband. But the tension between us had grown unbearable. He wasn't the man I married 7 years ago. Back then, he'd wrap me in his arms after a rough day and whisper that everything would be fine. Lately, he barely looked at me. His words were cold, distant, like I was just another burden in his already strained life. When I told him about another failed job interview, he barely reacted. "I'm trying so hard," I said, my voice trembling. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "We can't live on trying, Laura," he snapped. "Bills don't wait." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, like he'd already given up on me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like a failure. The rent was overdue. Our landlord had already warned us. We had days before eviction became a real threat. I thought about calling my parents but couldn't stomach the shame of admitting I'd failed. The next morning after James left for work without a goodbye, I made my choice. I had to talk to Mr. Thompson. He was an imposing man, tall, broad-shouldered, always dressed sharp. He carried a quiet authority that made you feel small. He owned half the properties in Riverside, and the way he handled things screamed money and power. I'd barely spoken to him before, just small talk between tenant and landlord. My hand shook as I knocked on his office door. When he opened it, his dark eyes locked onto mine like he already knew why I was there. "Laura," he said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "I was wondering when you'd show up." His words sent a chill down my spine. I forced a weak smile. "I just need more time to pay the rent. I lost my job and things have changed." He cut me off. "I know. I keep tabs on my tenants. You've been struggling for a while." Shame burned through me. I hated that he noticed. "Look," I swallowed hard, "if you could give us an extension, I promise I'll—" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Laura, landlords don't survive on promises." My throat tightened. I had nothing else to offer. "I can't give you more time." He went on, his eyes lingering on me in a way that twisted my stomach. "But I can offer you something else." I froze. I knew where this was going before he even said it. "You're a beautiful woman," he said, calm as if discussing the weather, "and I believe in fair exchanges." My body stiffened. I stepped back, my mind reeling. Words stuck in my throat. He raised his hands, feigning innocence. "No pressure, Laura. You need help. I can provide it. No strings attached. No strings." As if that made it better. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. Outside, I could breathe again, but the weight of his offer clung to me like damp rot. That night, James came home late. I waited, hoping for reassurance, some sign he still cared. But he barely noticed me. "You're late," I said softly. "Work's brutal," he muttered, loosening his tie. I wanted to believe him, but something in his voice felt wrong. "James, are we okay?" My voice was a whisper. He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time in weeks, but instead of warmth, I saw exhaustion. "We're fine, Laura," he said. But it felt like a lie. I nodded, my chest hollow. That night, Mr. Thompson's offer haunted me. It would be so easy to say yes just once to claw out of this mess. The thought made me sick, but it lingered. I told myself I'd find another way. I had to. Days passed, and things only got worse. I scoured job listings, sent out applications, got nothing back. I sold old clothes, jewelry, anything I could part with. It wasn't enough to cover groceries, let alone rent. James barely spoke to me. He came home late, drained, distant. Some nights he didn't come home at all. I started noticing things. His phone always on silent, the way he avoided touching me, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. I told myself I was paranoid, that stress was making me see things. But deep down, I knew something between us was broken. The eviction notice arrived 3 days later. Final warning, no more extensions. My hands shook as I read it, my stomach churning. I thought about calling James, but what was the point? He didn't care before, and he wouldn't now. That night alone in our dark apartment, reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. No money, no job, no help. I'd begged, fought, tried everything, and it wasn't enough. Mr. Thompson's words echoed cruel and tempting. A fair exchange, no strings. I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over his number. A sick weight pressed on my chest as I wrestled with myself. I'd spent my life believing I'd never compromise my morals, never end up in a place like this. But I'd never been this desperate. I pressed call. The phone barely rang before he answered, his voice smooth, knowing. "Laura," he said, "I've been waiting." Shame surged through me, but I choked it down. "I need help," I whispered. "I know," he replied. And just like that, the deal was set. No details, just understanding. My hands trembled as I hung up. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I sat in silence, trying to convince myself I could do this. Just once to survive. But I knew the truth. There's no such thing as just once. The guilt was already there, poisoning me, wrapping around my thoughts like a noose. I told myself not to think about James, about what I was about to do. I'd been faithful to him for 7 years, but had he been faithful to me, I wanted to believe he had, but doubt outweighed denial. When I met Mr. Thompson again, it felt like walking towards something I could never undo. His presence was overwhelming, his confidence unshakable. He didn't ask if I was sure. He already knew. When it was over, I felt sick. I couldn't even look in the mirror. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd traded a piece of myself for something temporary, something that didn't matter in the long run. But there was relief, too. The rent was paid. Eviction was off the table. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I told myself it was over, that I'd never do it again, that I could go back to normal like nothing happened. I was wrong. When I stepped into the apartment, James was waiting. And the look in his eyes told me he knew something had changed. His gaze lingered longer than usual, studying me in a way he hadn't in months. There was something different in his eyes, not the usual exhaustion or indifference, but suspicion. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me move around the apartment, pretending everything was normal. But I could feel it, the shift between us. The weight of what I'd done hung in the air. Even without evidence, he sensed it. I kept my distance, terrified that if I got too close, he'd see the guilt written on my face. That night, he was quieter than usual. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. "Where were you today?" My stomach twisted. "I was out," I said. He nodded slowly, his fingers tapping the table. Out where he hesitated. That was enough. He didn't push, but the damage was done. The next few days were unbearable. He grew colder, more distant. I thought I'd hidden my guilt well, but the tension between us thickened, suffocating. He stopped asking questions, but I could feel his unease every time he looked at me. I tried to remind myself that he'd pulled away first, that I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. The perfume, the late nights, the way he'd abandoned our marriage long before I made my choice. But knowing that didn't erase the guilt gnawing at me. Then I found the message. It wasn't even hidden. His phone sat on the counter, the screen lighting up with a notification he hadn't bothered to delete. A name I didn't know. A message I wished I'd never seen. Last night was amazing. When can I see you again? My chest tightened. The words blurred as I tried to process them. Everything in me screamed that this was a mistake, that there had to be another explanation. But I knew better. I'd known for a while. I set the phone down carefully, like touching it too hard would make reality worse. When James walked in that night, I didn't confront him right away. I wanted him to say something first, to at least pretend he wasn't lying to my face every time he said he was working late. But he didn't. He barely looked at me. So I spoke first. "Who is she?" He froze. His expression didn't change, but the way his body stiffened told me everything. He didn't even ask what I meant. He just knew. "Laura, don't," he said. I cut him off. "Not now." He sighed, rubbing his face like he was tired of the conversation already. "It's not what you think." I laughed, no humor in it. "It never is it?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, he exhaled. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened." The words cut deep, but what hurt more was how calm he was. Like he'd already accepted it. Like he didn't even regret it. "How long?" My voice was a whisper. He hesitated. That was answer enough. Something broke inside me. The last thread holding me together snapped, and suddenly I couldn't keep the truth inside anymore. "Me too," I said. His head snapped up. For the first time in months, I had his full attention. What I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Me too." Shock flickered across his face, then darkened into something heavier. "With who?" I swallowed. "Mr. Thompson." The silence that followed was suffocating. His expression twisted, unreadable, a mix of disbelief and anger. "You're kidding," he said. But he knew I wasn't. I shook my head. I was desperate. We were about to be evicted. I didn't know what else to do. His laugh was sharp, bitter. "So that makes it okay." My hands clenched. "You think what you did is better." He stepped closer, his eyes burning into mine. "At least I didn't sell myself." His words hit harder than a slap. I held my breath, refusing to look away. "At least I did it to survive." I shot back. "What's your excuse?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there staring at each other, both realizing at the same time that there was nothing left to fight for. Whatever love we'd had, whatever trust we'd built, it was gone. James shook his head and stepped back. "I can't do this." I knew what was coming before he said it. "I'm leaving." I didn't try to stop him. I didn't cry. I just nodded because deep down I'd known it would end like this. When he packed his things and walked out, I sat on the couch staring at the empty space he left behind. I wanted to believe what I'd done didn't change anything, that I could fix it, that we could get through this. But the truth was, we'd both been broken long before. The silence in the apartment was deafening. James was gone, and for the first time in years I felt truly alone. No more waiting for him to come home. No more pretending everything was fine. Just me and the consequences of my choices. I spent so long justifying what I'd done, convincing myself it was survival, that I had no other choice. But sitting there, staring at the empty space where James's things used to be the truth, was undeniable. I'd betrayed myself long before I betrayed him. Survival isn't just about money. It's about dignity, about holding on to who you are even in the darkest moments. And I'd let that slip away piece by piece, convincing myself it was the only way forward. I remembered the first time I felt everything falling apart. When James started pulling away, when the weight of our struggles became too much, I blamed him, resented him for not being the man he used to be. But was I the woman he married? Or had I changed in ways I hadn't even noticed? The past few months had turned me into someone I barely recognized. A woman who'd lost hope, who'd given up on herself, who'd made choices out of desperation instead of strength. I had to find my way back. The first thing I did was call Mr. Thompson. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice when he answered, like he knew why I was calling. But I cut him off before he could say anything. "It's over," I said, my voice firm. He chuckled softly. "Your choice, Laura." I swallowed the shame burning in my throat. "I made a mistake. I won't make it again." He sighed, almost disappointed. I hung up before he could say more. It wasn't just about him. It was about taking back control of my life, refusing to be a victim of my own bad decisions. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. I took any job I could find, waiting tables, freelancing, anything to get by. It wasn't easy. Some days felt impossible. But every dollar I earned, every small step forward, felt like a piece of myself coming back. James didn't call. He didn't text. And I didn't reach out either. I'd spent too long trying to hold on to something that was already broken. But now I understood. Some things can't be fixed. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. One evening after a long shift, I stood in front of the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in months. I didn't see the desperate woman who'd made a choice she couldn't take back. I saw someone stronger, someone who'd been through hell and was still standing. The past can't be erased, but it doesn't have to define you. I learned the hard way that desperation makes you do things you never thought you would. That betrayal isn't always clear-cut, that sometimes the worst choices come from pain, not malice. But I also learned that redemption is possible. Not through apologies, not through regret, but through change. I'm not that woman anymore, and I never will be again.